Hi, welcome to Feed Your Soul. I am Melinda, and you are watching our series on the Torah portions. The series is designed with followers of Jesus in mind, whether you call yourself Christian or Messianic, Catholic, Protestant, whatever denomination you find yourself in, or none of the above. If you love Jesus or Yeshua, these videos are designed to help us know our Bibles better than we already do. It's to help us understand the foundations of our faith, to know the front of the book better, or at least as well as we know the back of our Bibles. So we go week by week through the Torah portions, dividing them up throughout a whole year. We're getting towards the tail end of it. We're getting near the end of the book of Numbers. If you're new to the channel, check out the Torah study playlist because you can watch this study from the beginning and participate. You can jump in and ask questions in the comments and point out things that either don't make sense or you don't understand or you just think are incorrect, or point out things that you learned and found out for the first time by really diving in deep to the text along with us. This week, we are on the portion called Balak, and that shows up in Numbers 22, starting in verse 2 through Numbers 25, verse 9. Then we're going to be looking at Micah, most of chapter 5 and the beginning of chapter 6, and then 2 Peter chapter 2. The Torah portion names always come from the first significant word in that passage. And this one is named for this king of Moab who is afraid of Israel. Just to kind of summarize where we are, Israel is in the wilderness. They have completed at this point their 40 years of kind of wandering, their consequence for the older generation who just would not let Egypt be taken out of them. They were taken out of Egypt, but they still had a lot of Egypt inside of them. And this is sometimes I talk with people and they feel like God's response to the complaining or the lack of faith, about the whole story about the 12 spies being sent into the promised land, and 10 of them came back with a bad report and really a faithless report, a pessimistic report, a report that really stirred up the people to want to abandon the whole mission and go back to their land of slavery. I've heard of people who say that this was really excessive, like it's part of like this violence of God, who left these people to just die in the wilderness. This older generation, because that was the consequence, that they would die before their children would be able to enter. But as we go through this study and we just really see God setting apart a people unto himself so that they can take his name to the whole world was really about saving the whole world. And there's this mixture that just keeps coming up over and over again where people know of God, know of the creator of the universe, of Jehovah, but that knowledge of God becomes diluted or distorted, or even perverted into really intense forms of idolatry. And that is what is being fought against here, really, that God is keeping his people to know him only and not him and other gods, because Jehovah and other gods equals idolatry and ultimately evil because of what it produces. It does not produce life, it produces death. And we'll see a little peek of that here. Um, so the people are out in the wilderness, and they are moving towards the promised land. They're needing to go through different territories, and this Balak was afraid of the people and wanted to attack them or stop them, but wanted to do it afar and through this prophet named Balaam, which we will meet here. So we are at Numbers 22, and Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. And what had they done to the Amorites, right? I want to pause here because if this is your first portion with us, um, they had done something to the Amorites because the Amorites attacked them. There were no people that Israel was supposed to go conquer and take over, except the people who lived in just the land of Canaan. Um, they were trying to pass through some of these other areas and they were attacked. So I hear it. I hear it being spoken about that Israel just went and, like on this crusade of trying to proselytize and get people to follow their God. And when they didn't, they were killed. And this is not what it was. It wasn't that at all. None of this was about proselytizing or getting people to convert. There was evil. There was real evil going on in the land of Canaan. And it needed to stop. God was ready for that people, that space to be redeemed, for their sin to be stopped at that point in time. But that was it. Anyone else that Israel had to fight against, it was because they were attacked and they had to defend themselves. So we just need to remember that. Like, we want to be accurate and give an accurate portrayal of what's going on in the word. And yes, they were told to go dispossess Canaan, to dispossess the people out of the land, to take over the land completely, but just the land of Canaan. And we'll talk a little bit more later about why, a reminder about why this land. But okay, so back to our narrative. And Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites, and Moab was in great dread of the people because there were many. Moab was overcome with fear of the people of Israel, and Moab said to the elders of Midian, "This horde will now lick up all that is around us, as an ox licks up the grass of the field." So Balak, the son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at the time, sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river in the land of the people of Ammah, to call to him, saying, "Behold, the people has come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the earth, and they are dwelling opposite me. Come now, curse this people for me, since they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them from the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed." So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the fees for divination, or some versions, it's really in the Hebrew, it's like objects of divination for what is needed for divination, in their hand. And they came to Balaam and gave him Balak's message and said to him, "Lodge here tonight, and I will bring back word to you as Jehovah speaks to me." Yes, he uses the proper name of the God of creation, Jehovah. So the princes of Moab stayed with Balaam, and God came to Balaam and said, "Who are these men with you?" And Balaam said to God, "Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent me, saying, Behold, a people have come out of Egypt. It covers the face of the earth. Now come, curse them for me. Perhaps I shall be able to fight against them and drive them out." Um, God said to Balaam, "You shall not go with them, and you shall not curse the people, for they are blessed." So Balaam arose in the morning and said to the princes of Balak, "Go to your own land, for Jehovah has refused to let me go with you." So the princes of Moab rose and went to Balak and said, "Balaam refuses to come with us." Once again, Balak sent princes, more in number and more honorable than these, and they came to Balaam and said, "Thus says Balak, son of Zippor, let nothing hinder you from coming to me, for I will surely do you great honor, and whatever you say to me I will do. Come, curse this people for me." But Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, "Though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the command of Jehovah, my God, to do less or more. So you, too, please stay here tonight, that I may know what more Jehovah will say," because Jehovah wasn't clear before to me. And God came to Balaam at night and said to him, "If these men have come to call you, rise and go with them, but only do what I tell you." So Balaam rose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the princes of Moab. But God's anger was kindled because he went. And the angel of Jehovah took his stand in the way of his adversary. Now he was riding on the donkey, and his two servants were there with him. And the donkey saw the angel of Jehovah standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand. The donkey turned aside out of the road and went into the field. And Balaam struck the donkey to turn her into the road. Then the angel of Jehovah stood in a narrow path between the vineyards, with a wall on either side. And when the donkey saw the angel of Jehovah, she pushed against the wall and pressed Balaam's foot against the wall. So he struck her again. Then the angel of Jehovah went ahead and stood in a narrow place, where there was no way to turn, either to the right or to the left. When the donkey saw the angel of Jehovah, she lay down under Balaam. And Balaam's anger was kindled, and he struck the donkey with his staff. And Jehovah opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, "What have I done to you, that you have struck me these 3 times?" And Balaam said to the donkey, "Because you have made a fool of me. I wish I had a sword in my hand, for then I would kill you." And the donkey said to Balaam, am I not your donkey on which you have ridden all your life long to this day? Is it my habit to treat you this way? And he said, "No." Then Jehovah opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand. And he bowed down, and his face fell, or and he fell on his face. It's different than his face falling. Different idioms, right? He bowed down, he fell on his face. And the angel of Jehovah said to him, "Why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out to oppose you," most English translations say, but that's literally the word Satan. I have come out to you as a Satan, an adversary, because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned aside before me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, surely just now I would have killed you and let her live. Then Balaam said to the angel of Jehovah, "I have sinned, for I did not know that you stood in the road against me. Now, therefore, if it is evil in your sight, I will turn back." And the angel of Jehovah said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but speak only the word that I tell you." So Balaam went on with the princes of Balak. When Balak heard that Balaam had come, he went out to meet him at the city of Moab, on the border formed by the Arnon, at the extremity of the border. And Balak said to Balaam, "Did I not send to you to call you? Why did you not come to me? Am I not able to honor you?" Balaam said to Balak, "Behold, I have come to you. Have I now any power of my own to speak anything? The word that God puts in my mouth, that I must speak." Then Balaam went with Balak, and they came to Kiriath Huzoth, and Balak sacrificed oxen and sheep and sent for Balaam and for the princes who were with him. And in the morning, Balak took Balaam and brought him up to Bamoth Baal. And from there, he saw a fraction, or actually the edges, the ends of the people. So many people. So here is a little map as a reminder of just what's going on, right? We are following uh, Israel out of Egypt, and now we are kind of in this area where they need to cross the Jordan to get into the promised land and really take over Canaan. But in the meantime, they're supposed to be walking through some of these other spaces. And the Edomites didn't want them to walk through, and they attacked them. They had to fight. And it, so it continues to happen, right? So they're trying to walk through this great land of Moab, and they don't, the king of the Moabites does not want to let them walk through. Remember, these people who Israel is coming up against are really like cousins, right? Edom is that name for red. He's Esau's descent. That's Esau's descendants, Edom. We have Moab here. These wind up being sons of, definitely sons of Noah, and then likely some sons of Abraham are all kind of part of the leadership here. Abraham married a Midianite after Sarah died, Keturah, and remember Abraham's lineage was that he was Abraham's son of Tehor, right? And he and his whole family, he left his family left with him, left Ur of the Chaldeans, but there was a knowledge of God there. Abraham knew and walked with God, even where he was over in all the way over by the river, the Euphrates, the Tigris and the Euphrates is where Abraham actually came from. This is the same space that Balaam is coming from. So I don't want to lose everybody in the geography, but this is Noah's descendants, this is Abraham's descendants in this land who have a knowledge of Jehovah mixed with idolatry, mixed with other gods. And so that's what I want people to remember. This isn't just some people who never heard of the God of creation, who never heard of the great I am, Jehovah, who was, who is. These people have. The Canaanites, who the one area that Israel is supposed to go dispossess, were Canaan was a grandson of Noah, right? Ham's son was Canaan. And why are the Canaanites there? The book of Jubilees tells us that's an extra biblical book. I highly recommend it. You can decide if it's like kind of fan fiction written later on, or if it is the kind of book that it says it is, a revelation to Moses on the mountain. Either way, it gives us a little insight into people's an ancient understanding that Noah's sons were given land by lot, by chance, by drawing of straws, right? And Canaan did not get where Canaan is now, right? He got other land who was supposed to be in this promised land where Canaanites settled. It was supposed to be Shem. It was supposed to be Israel. But Ham knew there was going to be a problem, warns his son. We hear this in the book of Jubilees, warns his son, don't settle there. That's not going to be good. Canaan was like, I don't care. So we have this grandson of Noah being the father of this nation of great wickedness. The wickedness in Canaan was off the charts, but it's not that these people had no knowledge of the creator of the universe, the one who preserved Noah and his family in the flood. They knew, but they mixed it with evil. They mixed it with things that were not of God. And so now they're putting their children in they're sacrificing their children. The sexual perversion, like the things that we glean and see that is going on in Canaan is abhorrent. And it doesn't come from no knowledge of God, but it comes from some knowledge of God, but not keeping that set apart, allowing that knowledge of God to be diluted and mixed and really just turned into something that is entirely evil. Because a little bit of God with a lot of idolatry is not okay. And it's not enough. And it's so important that God is taking this one family, right, who is now a nation, and saying that no Egypt is going to come with you into the promised land. It can't, because he wants a remnant. He wants a people who are going to be able to take his name, his ways, right? The ways of the kingdom of God, those Judeo-Christian principles that most people watching this video live by already. You live by these principles because of this nation being able to be set apart, not a diluted way of following God, but an unadulterated knowledge of God. And it's why God came to be in their midst, so they understood that there was a difference. Okay. So all that to say, this is where they are. They're trying to get through Moab or around or whatever to get into the promised land. But now we have Balak is afraid. And so he gets this prophet of God who, again, there seems to be a mixture in Balaam's life. Balaam clearly knows the name of Jehovah, has the ability to bless and curse, and God sends his angel, the angel of Jehovah, to speak directly to him. Some sources say that Balaam is a descendant of Laban, which is a nephew of Abraham, right? So these people had this knowledge of God. Abraham had to separate himself from his family because they weren't living for God. Um, Abraham's father, according to some extra biblical books, was actually an idol maker. He fabricated idols, household idols. So Abraham had to separate himself from his family. So like here's the remnant of that family. And apparently this prophet Balaam comes from that family. And then we have the Edomites, which are Esau. That's another name for, so Jacob and Esau, right? So these are basically cousins, right? Um, Israel's cousins. They're trying to move through and get into the promised land to follow God's mandate that they are going to go take this land. And this is what they're coming up against. They're not just out proselytizing and trying to get converts and killing people, right? They are doing what God said, and then others are attacking them. So Balaam, we'll focus on him for a moment. We just were talking about his kind of ancestry. He was a prophet. He was able to speak for Jehovah at times, apparently. What he said, people he would bless would be blessed, and people he would curse would be cursed. But we're going to see pretty quickly later on in this portion, and in portions to come, that he is certainly not a prophet who follows after God in any kind of consistent way. It is all a mixture, right? Now, nobody's just one thing, but Balaam is he's not just one of God's prophets who has some flaws. There's this mixture here, and we see that there's divination involved. So he again has this knowledge of Jehovah mixed up with all of these pagan ideas and these idolatrous ideas. So mixing light and darkness, mixing good and evil. And God is not okay with that ever. Because what happens is when you're mixing in evil with goodness, it's just what happens to humanity, right? It's like that evil just grows and encroaches and encroaches. We need to have none. So this slide is just a picture of a historical artifact that was found in the 60s. I want to say 1968, but sometime in the 60s in the country of Jordan. And it is it's ink on plaster. And so it's an artifact that shows the name of Balaam, son of Peor. And it confirms, it's an extra biblical source that confirms the existence of this person. And it's pretty fascinating. There it is. So before we move on, we have to talk about the rest of what went on in this section. It's interesting. Is it a parable? Is it literal? I'm not going to fight people on either of those points, right? Is this a story told to explain and to tell the children? I think there are stories like that in the Bible, that many of the stories in the Bible are kind of set up and told in very child-friendly formats, right? Not to say that that means they didn't happen, but it's so we can retell these stories in an interesting way, and the next generation will remember it. But the donkey speaks. Balaam doesn't even seem surprised that the donkey speaks, right? But I wanted to point this out. In the book of Jubilees, which we had said is an extra biblical book, it talks about on the day that Adam and Eve had to leave the garden in Jubilees 3:28, and on that day was closed the mouth of all beasts, of cattle and of birds and whatever walks and whatever moves, so that they could no longer speak, for they had all spoken with one another with one lip and with one tongue. So this is just to point out how these two sections kind of support one another, and that animals had the ability to speak in the garden. It makes you kind of understand that Eve wasn't so taken aback when the serpent starts speaking, right? If people and animals were able to communicate in one language in the garden, that kind of explains that, doesn't it? And it reminds me of The Magician's Nephew for any C.S. Lewis fans, right? I wonder if he was familiar with the book of Jubilees because in that book, all the animals can speak in the beginning, and that they were created with the ability to speak. So fascinating. In his series, this ability of animals to be able to speak has to do with ones who kind of kept their knowledge of God and of who they were created to be, and the others that kind of didn't, weren't able to speak. So interesting connection. What do you think? Is this a parable to kind of give us an understanding of who Balaam is or was this donkey literally speaking? And listen, I know that sounds strange, right? But this is a God who can part seas, who created the world. I believe he can cause an animal to speak, whether or not they could all speak in the garden. Um, God can put words anywhere. He can put signs anywhere. He can use anything to speak to us, anything or anyone. And I think that that is what we need to take away from this donkey speaking to get Balaam's attention is if God can use a female donkey to speak to her owner to get his attention, we he can use anyone. That doesn't mean anything or everything that someone says is of the Lord, but God can speak to us in countless ways. And so we don't want to discount things just because we don't like the seminary someone went to, or we don't like their politics or something like that, right? God can use anyone or anything to speak to his people. But we have to filter that through the word of God. And so this angel is what the donkey sees, right? And so I just wanted to point out, in case you missed it, the first time we went through that section, is that the angel was put there as it said to oppose, I think, in most translations, but it is actually as the adversary. So it says Satan. We get the word Satan, that proper name for the enemy of God, right? Um, it's really not a proper name. It has evolved into that. It is a descriptive. Hasatan is the adversary. And right here, we have this angel of the Lord who was put in the way of Balaam as an adversary, as his enemy, to keep him from going against the will of God. Satan. Okay, let's get back into the narrative. Numbers 23, and this is Balaam's first prophecy. And Balaam said to Balak, build for me here 7 altars and prepare for me here 7 bulls and 7 rams. Balak did as Balaam said, and Balak and Balaam offered on each altar a bull and a ram. And Balaam said to Balak, stand beside your burnt offering and I will go. Perhaps Jehovah will come meet me. And whatever he shows me, I will tell you. And he went to a bare height, and God met Balaam. And Balaam said to him, I have arranged the 7 altars, and I have offered on each altar a bull and a ram. And Jehovah put a word in Balaam's mouth and said, return to Balak, and thus you shall speak. And he returned to him. And behold, he and all the princes of Moab were standing beside the burnt offering. And Balaam took up his proverb and said, that's what the word literally means in Hebrew, took up his saying or his proverb and said, from Aram, Balak has brought me, the king of Moab, from the eastern mountains. Come, curse Jacob for me, and come, denounce Israel. How can I curse whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce whom Jehovah has not denounced? For from the top of the crags I see him, from the hills I behold him. Behold, a people dwelling alone, and not counting itself among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob, or number the 4th part of Israel? And we're going to talk about this, about how many of the things that Balaam says mirrors the promises to Abraham. So this is Abraham's first promise, that your descendants will outnumber the sands of the sea, right? Or the stars in the sky. So who can count the dust of Jacob or number the 4th part of Israel? Let me die the death of the upright, and let my end be like his. And Balak said to Balaam, what have you done to me? I took you to curse my enemies, and behold, you have done nothing but bless them. And he answered and said, must I not take care to speak what Jehovah puts in my mouth? And verse 13, and Balak said to him, please come with me to another place from which you may see them. You shall only see a fraction of them, and you shall not see them all. Then curse them for me from there. And he took him to a field of Zophim and to the top of Pisgah, and built 7 altars and offered a bull and a ram on each altar. Balaam said to Balak, stand here beside your burnt offering while I meet Jehovah over there. And Jehovah met Balaam and put a word in his mouth and said, return to Balak, and thus shall you speak. And he came to him. And behold, he was standing beside his burnt offering, and the princes of Moab with him. And Balak said to him, what has Jehovah spoken? And Balaam took up his discourse and said, or his proverb, that is, and said, rise, Balak, and hear. Give ear to me, O son of Zippor. God is not a man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind. Has he said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not fulfill it? Behold, I receive a command to bless. He is blessed. I cannot revoke it. He has not beheld misfortune in Jacob, nor has he seen trouble in Israel. Jehovah, their God, is with them, and the shout of a king is among them. God brings them out of Egypt, and is for them like the horns of the wild ox. For there is no enchantment against Jacob, no divination against Israel. Now it shall be said of Jacob and Israel, what God has wrought. Behold a people, as a lioness it rises up, and as a lion it lifts itself. It does not lie down until it has devoured the prey and drunk the blood of the slain. Right? So the children of Abraham will conquer their enemies. That's promise number 2 that God gave to Abraham at the Akedah, at the when Abraham was supposed to sacrifice Isaac, and the angel came and stopped him. It's like this mirror of this prophecy. And Balak said to Balaam, do not curse them at all, and do not bless them at all. But Balaam answered Balak, did I not tell you all that Jehovah says I must do? And Balak said to Balaam, come now, I will take you to another place. Perhaps it will please God that you may curse them for me from there. Not sure what Balak is thinking here. So Balak took Balaam to the top of Peor, which overlooks the desert. And Balaam said to Balak, build for me here 7 altars and prepare them for me here 7 bulls and 7 rams. And Balak did as Balaam said and offered a bull and a ram on each altar. When Balaam saw that it had pleased Jehovah to bless Israel, he did not go as other times to use divination, but set his face toward the wilderness. And Balaam lifted up his eyes and saw Israel camping tribe by tribe. And the Spirit of God came upon him, and he took up his discourse and said, before we say what Balaam had said, notice the times before that when he went away from Balak, he was going to use this divination to get God to come and talk to him. But this time, he understood he didn't need to use these things to get God to speak to him. The Spirit of God came upon him this time. The oracle of Balaam, the son of Beor, the oracle of the man whose eyes is open, oracle or prophecy. The oracle of him who hears the words of God, of Elohim, who sees the visions of the Almighty, falling down with his eyes uncovered. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your encampments, O Israel, like palm groves that stretch afar, like gardens beside a river, like aloes that Jehovah has planted, like cedar trees beside the waters. Water shall flow from his buckets, and his seed shall be in many waters. His king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. God brings him out of Egypt, and it is for him like the horns of the wild ox. He shall eat up the nations, his adversaries, and he shall break their bones in pieces and pierce them through with arrows. He crouched, he lay down like a lion and like a lioness. Who will rouse him up? Blessed are those who bless you, and cursed are those who curse you. Again, mirroring what God has said to Abraham. And Balak's anger was kindled against Balaam, and he struck his hands together, and Balak said to Balaam, I called you to curse my enemies, and behold, you have blessed them these 3 times. Therefore, now flee to your own place. I said, certainly I will honor you, but Jehovah has held you back from honor. And Balaam said to Balak, did I not tell your messengers whom you sent me, if Balak should give me his house full of silver and gold, I would not be able to go beyond the word of Jehovah, to do either good or bad of my own will. What Jehovah speaks, that will I speak. And now, behold, I am going to my people. Come, I will let you know what this people will do to your people in the latter days. So Balaam's not done. This is a future prophecy of what Israel will do to really the nations future. And this is really this part is really there's a lot of messianic prophecy, right? And it depends who you ask what is considered messianic. This is considered by many the first of the messianic prophecies in the whole Bible. Outright messianic prophecies, because I do feel like we do see one very early on in Genesis, right, about crushing the serpent's head. But this is one of the first here about the future Messiah. And he took up his discourse and said, the oracle of Balaam, son of Beor, the oracle of the man whose eyes is open, the oracle of him who hears the words of God and knows the knowledge of the Most High, who sees the vision of the Almighty, falling down with his eyes uncovered. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter or a staff. We talked about that word staff. It's really a staff, shall rise out of Israel. It shall crush the forehead of Moab and shall break down all the sons of Sheth. Edom shall be dispossessed. Seir also, his enemies, shall be dispossessed. Israel is doing valiantly, and one from Jacob shall exercise dominion and destroy the survivors of the cities. Then he looked on Amalek and took up his discourse and said, Amalek was the first among the nations, but its end is utter destruction. And he looked upon on the Kenite and took up his discourse and said, enduring is your dwelling place, and your nest is set in the rock. Nevertheless, Cain shall be burned alive when Ashur takes you away captive. And he took up his discourse and said, alas, who shall live when God does this? But ships shall come from Kittim and shall afflict Ashur and Eber, and he too shall come to utter destruction. Then Balaam rose and went back to his place, and Balak also went his way. So there's a lot there. Those 4 prophecies of Balaam were really some of the most beautiful things ever said about biblical Israel, and some of the most jarring and scary things said about the nations around them. That God will not stand for this anymore. These sons of really these sons of Noah who are coming against their cousins. God's not going to allow it to continue. And the star that shall come out of Jacob, this is now, but not yet. I see it, but it's far off. And some of this, Israel will dispossess some of these people from the land as they need to move through and go to Canaan and follow God's directive. But some of this hasn't happened yet, and it's an end time prophecy. Those who have this knowledge of Jehovah, they know him, they know who he is, yet they mock, yet they try to use him for their own purposes, yet they try to get him to like Balak did with Balaam, right? Curse who they want cursed and give blessings that they want rather than following Jehovah's will. And it's all of this mixture, right? We have these, clearly there is this knowledge of sacrificing to Jehovah, but it's done in a way that is about moving God to do Balak's will, right? It isn't honoring God and his will. And so the mixtures are just what needs to go, that Yehovah only. And so it's a reminder for us in our own lives. Where are the mixtures? Where is it like, yes, we love God and we want to do things this way? It's it's really common, actually, among people who call themselves Christians. We think some of this stuff, this idol worship or divination or seeking the dead, things like that, or this or sacrificing children to Molech, all these things that come up that just sound like, oh, this is like old idolatry stuff. That's not the type of idolatry we have now. Now we just spend too much or we watch too much TV. There is a large portion of Christians who go see psychics, who talk to the dead, who believe that their loved ones are the ones who are looking out for them. And that's not of God. It's not. That's mixing in these pagan ideas, calling on the dead. We need to be real here. Going to get your fortune told, going to tarot card readings, going to psychics, going to talk to your dead relatives, thinking about people who have passed away in a way that they're with you and they're looking down on you. Those are all things that come to us from pagan influences. And we need to not. We need to be the ones who know our word, know what God expects of us. He wants us to know that it's him, he, Yehovah, who looks out for us. It is him who guides our steps, not those who have died before us. And so you could just see we need to examine our own hearts and our own lives. And those of us who call ourselves Christ followers, are we following the ways of Yehovah? It's important because all this mixture, it dilutes the power of God. It gives him a name that he doesn't have, right? It's like taking his name in vain because it's giving him a reputation that he does not want. He wants us set apart for him. So before we move on, just a reminder, because I wasn't sure if I was going to remember to talk about it, but it's just really neat how Balaam's prophecies really do seem to mirror Abraham. And some Jewish resources really talk about these two prophets being like the yin and yang, the mirroring forces here, that like Abraham is this prophet of God and Balaam is this prophet of like the he is a prophet of Yehovah, but with this mixture, right? So they're just kind of like antagonists, but that they're also relatives, right? This is like Abraham's great great nephew or something along those lines. And so we have Balaam really repeating these blessings that were given to Abraham as the instead of cursing Israel, right? He's basically repeating these. And they seem to follow the pattern that when the angel of the Lord came to Abraham to um, tell him to not hurt the boy, during the whole Akedah, the binding of Isaac, that's called, um, but that God will bless you and I will multiply your descendants like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. To that your descendants will possess the gates of their enemies, right? So they will be the ones who overcome. If you are an enemy of Israel, you're not going to be the one to win. And then the third one is, and through your offspring, all the nations of the earth will be blessed because you have obeyed my voice. Now, Balaam didn't quote that exactly. And so it makes you wonder why. Why did the pattern kind of split there? And if we go back to another promise of Abraham, this is really what Balaam had quoted. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. Whoever blesses Israel will be blessed. Whoever curses him will be cursed. And the idea is that Balaam was connecting these two thoughts. And how will God bless the nations? If you obey my voice, I will be able to, first of all, that's a way that you get blessing, right? Because we obey. And because obeying Yehovah is what brings blessing, because then we are walking in his ways and his ways bring blessing. And then how will this whole world be blessed is because the blessing of Israel brings upon blessing, right? The lifting up of the nation of Israel, the adding yourself to the nation of Israel, or honoring the people who are honoring Jehovah, that brings blessing. And if you're going to go against the set apart people of God, that's going to bring cursing. And so it's just an interesting connection of these two passages in Genesis 12, when like Abraham is called out of Ur, of the Chaldeans, called out of the land of paganism. Um, all the way to where he is told, kind of tested, um, and passes that test with his son Isaac. So cool connections. Numbers 25. While Israel lived in Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So they're hanging out in the plains of Moab. They are going after the women of Moab, and they're sacrificing to the pagan idols. And the anger of Jehovah was kindled against Israel. I imagine so. And Jehovah said to Moses, take all the chiefs of the people and hang them in the sun before Jehovah, that the fierce anger of Jehovah may turn away from Israel. So the chiefs are allowing this to happen. The leaders of the people are allowing Israel to be, after all of this time, to be bowing down to the idols of the land. And Moses said to the judges of Israel, each of you kill those of his men who have yoked themselves to Baal of Peor. And behold, one of the people of Israel came and brought a Midianite woman to his family. In the sight of Moses and in the sight of the whole congregation of Israel, while they were weeping in the entrance of the tent of meeting, when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he rose and left the congregation and took a spear in his hand and went after the man of Israel into the bed chamber. It's really a brothel or bed chamber, into that tent and pierced both of them, the man of Israel and the woman through her belly. Thus the plague on the people of Israel was stopped. Nevertheless, those who died by the plague were 24,000. So now we have a new character who is the name of our next portion, Pinchas or Phineas. And it doesn't seem like it explicitly says what's going on, but if you can imagine what is happening, if you're able to put a spear between them through the man and the woman at the same time, and this word that says tent in most of our translation is really not a word used often, but I kind of looked through the word, and it does mean like bed, chamber, or even brothel. So they were in the bedroom of a tent, and this act of lying with a woman, this act of it's really temple prostitution, because it was looked as a holy thing in many of these pagan cultures. It was this union between humans and God, is what they believed this was. So men would be committing adultery or committing fornication according to Jehovah's ways, and calling it worship. And this was happening as the people are supposed to be getting ready to go dispossess the land of people who are acting this way, right? There's sexual immorality, they're sacrificing their children, there's unspeakable things going on in Canaan. And here are the people of Israel are still participating in this kind of thing. And it's unclear if these people who died were of the second generation or still the last remaining of that first generation who was already prophesied to not go into the land. I'm hoping it's the latter, that it's these parents who already God knew. Well, God knows no matter what, but it's these parents that were already, it was already stated that they weren't going to make it in because they just could not get this idolatrous disbelief and disobedience out of their hearts. So this is a rough one. This is a really interesting portion. There is some rough stuff in here, but we need to remember the holiness of God. And this isn't just about like live and let live. It's God said no. You people who I brought you out of Egypt, you agreed to be my people. I said, no, you're not going to act as the pagans do, as the nations do. You are going to behave by my behavior, my kingdom laws. And they said, okay, right? They agreed to it. They became they became active participants in this covenant. And over and over and over again, they're being pulled away into the world. Okay, so our prophet portion this week is in Micah. Such a lovely part of Micah. I love Micah 6:8 might be one of my very favorite verses in the Bible. But let's start in 5, verse 1. We're backing up a little bit to the beginning of 5, just because I like context and why start in verse 7 or 8. Okay. Now, O daughter of troops, mobilize your troops, for a siege is laid against us. With a rod they strike the cheek of the judge of Israel. But you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, who are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come forth for me one ruler over Israel, whose origins are of old, from the days of eternity. Therefore, Israel will be abandoned until she who is in labor has given birth. Then the rest of his brothers will return to the children of Israel. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of Jehovah, in the majestic name of Jehovah his God. And they will dwell securely, for then his greatness will extend to the ends of the earth. And he will be our peace when Assyria invades our land and tramples our citadels. We will raise against it 7 shepherds, even 8 leaders of men. And they will rule the land of Assyria with a sword, and the land of Nimrod with the blade drawn. So he will deliver us when Assyria invades our land and marches into our borders. The remnant of Jacob will be in the midst of many peoples, like dew from Jehovah, like showers on the grass, which do not wait for men or linger for mankind. Then the remnant of Jacob will be among the nations, in the midst of many peoples, like a lion among the beasts of the forest, like a young lion among the flocks of sheep, which tramples and tears it as it passes through, with no one to rescue them. Your hand will be lifted over your foes, and your enemies will be cut off. In that day, declares Jehovah, I will remove your horses from among you and wreck your chariots. I will remove the cities of your land and tear down all your strongholds. I will cut the sorceries from your hand, and you will have no fortune tellers. I will cut off the carved images and sacred pillars from among you, so that you will no longer bow down to the work of your own hands. I will root out the Asherah poles from your midst, and I will demolish your cities. I will take vengeance in anger and wrath upon the nations that have not obeyed me. Hear now what Jehovah says. Arise, plead your case before the mountains, and let the hills hear your voice. Hear, O mountains, Jehovah's indictment, you in enduring foundations of the earth. For Jehovah has a case against his people, and he will argue it in Israel. My people, what have I done to you? Testify against me on how I have wearied you, for I have brought you up out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you from the house of slavery. I sent Moses before you, as well as Aaron and Miriam. My people, remember what Balak, king of Moab, counseled, and what Balaam, son of Beor, answered. Remember your journey from Shittim to Gilgal, so that you may acknowledge the righteousness of Jehovah. With what shall I come before Jehovah when I bow down before God on high? Should I come to him with burnt offerings, with year-old calves? Would Jehovah be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I present my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does Jehovah require of you? But to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Before I talk about that last verse in that portion, can we just point out that God said he sent Moses and Aaron and Miriam to lead Israel? Okay. Yeah. The amount of talk that still goes on in modern churches about women in leadership, just enough already. Miriam was the prophetess. She was sent to lead Israel out of Egypt along with her brothers. She's right there next to Aaron. It was like Moses, of course, is the leader, and then we have Aaron and Miriam, like, together on the same level. She was a prophetess, and when I just, like, Googled a little bit about this, I found an article. It was from, I think, Chabad, which is a Jewish Bible study, site, and I came up with an article. I think it was 21 prophets or prophetesses, 21, the most, 21, prophets that you should know, and, like, 10 of them, maybe not 10, but close, a large portion of them were women, that women are considered prophetesses in, Hebraic background, and Miriam is one of them. And can we just stop already? Like, Yehovah does not say that she can't speak for me, unless she goes through her head pastor or unless she goes through her husband or her father. It's just enough. Just, I'm tired with people picking and choosing what they want to believe from the Bible. Okay, off that soapbox. Micah. Micah's name means who is like Yah, and I just love it. I just love the book of Micah, and I just love this um, prophet and his heart for the things of God. And who is like Yah, right? I just feel like Micah's name kind of gives us a little bit of a thesis, a little bit of a theme for this week. Who is like Yah? No one. Stop following after these idols that were made with your own hands, because no one is like him. And what does he require of you? So this is like my favorite verse, one of them. I mean, top 5 probably in the Bible. Um, to act justly, to do justice, or do righteousness. That's really what that means in the Hebrew. To love mercy, chesed, loving kindness, to love the kindness and mercy that we can show upon people that don't deserve it or can't earn it, and to walk humbly with our God, because to walk with Him means we must be doing His ways. We can't walk with our God and not be walking in the ways that He calls us to. Then we wouldn't be walking with Him. Um, so just a reminder right here that walking with Yehovah means walking in his ways. And I think that that is what this verse calls us to do. It doesn't absolve us of our responsibility to what God calls us to do. It deepens it, that this is what is required of us, to love justice, to love what is right. And how do we define what is right? How do we do justice? We need to know what God has defined as right and wrong. How do we love in a charitable way? How do we love mercy? It's because we take the power of Jehovah and the gratitude of what He's given us, and we let that pass through us onto others, and we walk humbly with Jehovah by doing His will. And we know His will when we know His word. All right, 2 Peter 2 for our New Testament pairing here. Now there were also false prophets among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you. They will secretly introduce destructive heresies, even denying the master who brought them, bringing swift destruction on themselves. Many will follow in their depravity, and because of them, the way of truth will be defamed. In their greed, these false teachers will exploit you with deceptive words. The long-standing verdict against them remains in force, and their destruction does not sleep. For if God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell, the word there is actually Tartarus, and we'll talk about that in a minute, placing them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment. If he did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but preserved Noah, a preacher of righteousness, among the 8, if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to destruction, reducing them to ashes as an example of what was coming to the ungodly, and if he rescued Lot, the righteous man, distressed by the depraved conduct of the lawless, for that righteous man living among them day after day was tormented in his righteous soul by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. If all this is so, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials and to hold the unrighteous for punishment on the day of judgment. This Tartarus here is referring to the place where angels are held, and this is pointed out in the book of Jubilees and also Enoch. Um, so it's interesting, and Jude also, we get some of this in the book of Jude. It it's an interesting concept that isn't talked a whole lot about, but that these angels who weren't doing what they were supposed to do were actually put in chains and punished and held in this space until the end of time. It's not actually hell, what our modern ideas of like Greek forms of, but it's this place that can hold these spiritual beings until Judgment Day. Anyway, um, such punishment is especially reserved for those who indulge the corrupt desires of the flesh and despise authority. Bold and self willed, they are unafraid to slander glorious beings. Yet, not even angels, though greater in strength and power, dare to bring such slanderous charges against them before the Lord. These men are like irrational animals, creatures of instinct, born to be captured and destroyed. They blaspheme in matters they do not understand. And like such creatures, they too will be destroyed. The harm they will suffer is the wages of their wickedness. They consider it a pleasure to carouse in broad daylight. They are blots and blemishes, reviling in their deception as they feast with you. Their eyes are full of adultery, and their desire for sin is never satisfied. They seduce the unstable. They are accursed children with hearts trained in greed. They have left the straight way and wandered off to follow the way of Balaam, son of Beor, who loved the wages of wickedness. But he was rebuked for his transgression by a donkey, otherwise without speech, that spoke with a man's voice and restrained the prophet's madness. These men are springs without water and mists driven by a storm. Blackest darkness is reserved for them, with lofty but empty words. They appeal to the sensual passions of the flesh and entice those who are just escaping from others who live in error. They promise them freedom while they themselves are slaves to depravity, for a man is a slave to whatever has mastered him. If indeed they have escaped the corruption of the world through the knowledge of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, only to be entangled and overcome by it again, their final condition is worse than the first. It would have been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than to have known it and then turned away from the holy commandment passed on to them. Of them, the proverbs are true. A dog returns to its vomit, and a sow that is washed goes back to her wallowing in the mud. So it just brings us back to what I feel like is our theme. There will be those who are depraved among us. There were and there are. And we need to be careful not to follow them. We need to be so set apart that our light outshines them. And that what are we called to do? We are called to love justice, to love grace, mercy, and loving kindness, and to walk humbly with our God. That's it. We need to walk humbly with our God. That's our whole charge. It's our whole call as believers. No more than that. And it's such a beautiful, I just feel like it's a beautiful way to end here. I'm grateful for all of you who watch along with me every week. I am aware I'm still a week behind. I will catch up. It wasn't this week. It will likely be next week. And we'll get back on track, but still just 1 week behind. So if you're watching this on Sabbath, happy Sabbath, Shabbat Shalom. I pray that yours is peaceful. Praying for people hurting out there. There's people in my life who are hurting right now. There's people who are sick and need lifting up in their bodies and their minds. And so I'm just lifting up all of those people today. In my personal life and around the world, I know there are many hurting. So join me in that we can be lights where light is needed, light in the darkness, and that we can take this charge to love justice, to do justice, to love mercy and loving kindness, and to walk humbly with Yehovah in his ways and do his will. All right, until next time, have a wonderful Sabbath and a lovely week. And don't forget, put your comments, questions, thoughts in the comments. Follow this channel if you're new. Sharing and all of those things, it does help the channel grow, and it helps its vision. It helps it get seen on YouTube. It helps the algorithm. So if this blessed you, that would be a way to really help me grow. And I will see you all next time.